afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Recruit Military Live, a continuing series of live broadcasts covering all things military transition, veteran employment, mil-spouse employment, and much more. My name is Lucas Connolly, retired U.S. Army officer and former TAP program manager, here to share with you the ins and outs of navigating the tumultuous waters of civilian employment. If you are in search of meaningful employment, then you are in the right place. Please visit rmvets.com/live to learn more. So, are you getting ready to transition out of the military? Have you given some consideration to a career in the recruiting field? Well, today we're going to be gaining some insights into the recruiting field that just might help you secure a great post-military career, so don't touch that mouse. Our guest today grew up in Central Florida and attended the United States Military Academy at West Point. Upon graduation in 2012, she commissioned as a military police officer in the U.S. Army. She served 8 years on active duty, during which she held positions as platoon leader, company executive officer, detachment commander for a CID unit, and much more. Her military career culminated with her commanding the 110th Military Police Company out of Fort Carson, Colorado. In 2020, she separated from the Army and decided to try her hand at the $200 billion industry that we know as recruiting. She joined the Recruit Military team and has been working as a client success manager ever since. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alexis Marione to the show. Hey, Alexis.
Hi, sorry, I was on mute there. Thanks for having me, Lucas.
Well, we're glad you could be on the show today. And folks out there who are viewing, and now that you know who we are, we'd love to hear who you are. Hit us up in that chat window. Leave us a comment. Let us know where you're watching from, who you are, who you're with, and what your status is. Are you active duty? Are you in transition? Are you a veteran? Are you a mil-spouse, a caregiver, or something else we haven't thought of? Throughout the broadcast, feel free to jump in there in the chat with your questions, comments, and concerns, and time allowing, we'll get after it. All right, Alexis, the spotlight's on you. Talk to us a little bit about your decision to leave the military and your transition experience.
Right. So I thought originally that I would only stay in the Army for 5 years, fulfill my minimum commitment as a military police officer after graduating from West Point, and the Army just was really good to me and kept giving me great opportunities, so I stayed a little bit longer. But I got married to an active duty Army officer, and I personally did not want to do the dual active duty with kids thing, and we wanted to start a family. So I decided that after company command, it was a good time for me to get out and transition to a civilian career. However, I did that in the middle of the pandemic. So that was a pretty big challenge for me. Not only is it hard transitioning from the military, there's so many things that go into it and challenges that present themselves, but most companies were on hiring freezes, and then I was geographically constrained by my husband still being active duty. So I initially started looking into project management positions or operations roles because I felt like my military experience and leadership really lent itself to those types of opportunities, and I still do. But because of the hiring freezes and because of the limited number of opportunities to me, I was using Bradley Morris and Recruit Military Services. Fast forward a couple of months, my husband found out that he was going to be stationed in Williamsburg, Virginia for a couple of years. So I updated Bradley Morris, Recruit Military, said, hey, please start looking for something in Virginia, and the main office is here. So they actually saw my resume and thought that I might make a good recruiter and offered me the position here.
All right, fantastic. So for those folks out there who really don't understand the recruiting industry, I mean, for many of us who served in the military, our entire paradigm of what a recruiter is that the staff sergeant is sergeant first class down to the local recruiting office, or that slick headhunter over the phone who you're really not sure what his motivations are. Peel back the onion for us just a little bit. Give us some insight on what the real recruiting industry look like. I mean, in general terms, what are the opportunities that exist for somebody who may be interested in joining the industry?
Right. So I think there's probably 3 main avenues, one of which is going to be corporate or in-house recruiting. So think about large companies, maybe like Amazon. They would employ in-house recruiters who are supposed to go out and find them new talent to bring in to the company, new people that they can hire. So you're working for a larger specific company and you're on their payroll. Then there's contingency recruiting. So you're doing that one-to-one matchmaking between a candidate who's looking for a job and a company that wants to hire them. That's a little bit different, where you are going to be paid when the candidate is hired. You're not on payroll, you're not on salary by a specific company, because you're working with multiple different candidates, multiple different companies. And then finally, you mentioned the headhunter. So somebody who's targeting maybe more passive job seekers, right? People who are open to new opportunities but aren't actively on the job search, and they're using multiple different avenues. So maybe, personal networking, the headhunters using networking, internet searches, job boards, that kind of thing.
All right, awesome. So tell us about the role you're filling now. I mean, what kind of things are you doing on a day-to-day basis? What it is that you're doing to connect folks with those career opportunities?
Yeah, so I never thought that I would be a recruiter. It just never crossed my mind, right? And what I do is so much more than just going out and finding new veterans to bring into our community. In fact, I don't really do that at all. We have different departments, different units, if you will, one of which goes out and finds those veterans to bring into our database. And then we've got like our sales reps who go out and bring the job opportunities into our system. I play matchmaker between the two. So I am working with about 30 different companies at any given time, looking to fill their openings. And they are searching for specific skills, specific experiences from the veteran job seekers. And I'm looking to make that one-to-one match between the veteran job seeker and the company. Now, what does that look like on a daily basis? I have 30 job orders in our system. When I get a new job order, I get kind of the bare bones, hey, this is the company and this is what they're looking for. I hop on the phone with the point of contact at that company and I just get all the details, right? What's the compensation look like? What background are you looking for? What's your ideal candidate? Do you offer relocation? What kind of bonuses, incentives do you have? What's your training program look like? So I'm asking all of those questions. Hey, what's the hiring process look like? Are we doing a phone interview? Are we doing a panel interview? Are we bringing candidates out on a site visit? Will you pay for that? I'm asking all those kinds of questions. And I'm establishing a relationship with that company that's looking to hire the veterans. After that, I run a query of our database for the correct profile and background of those candidates. So I'm putting in those parameters to narrow my search to find the ideal candidates. Once I'm doing that, I'm sending out texts and emails to those candidates that might be a fit. And they add themselves and express interest within our system. Once that happens, I then review their resume and I call them and talk to them a little bit more about their experience, about the job, and whether or not they're going to be a good fit. And then I walk them through the entire hiring process. So I'm advising the companies about the hiring process. I'm advocating for the veterans based on their skill set. Based on the job opening, I'm conducting interview prep with the candidate. I'm making sure that placement is successful for both the company that's looking to hire the veteran and the veteran job seeker. So all the way through offer negotiation and then even into the onboarding process. That's all part of what I do.
Wow, that sounds like a very busy job. That sounds like quite a bit of a hustle.
It is, especially when there's I'm doing that process for 30 different companies.
And how many connections would you say that you make on, say, a weekly or a monthly basis? I mean, are we talking dozens? Are we talking a handful?
Oh, upwards of 100 sometimes. I'm on the phone all day, every day, talking to veterans, getting a feel for their experience, trying to figure out what they're looking for, how their job search is going. And then, beyond the screening process, I'm calling them multiple times to talk to them about scheduling interviews, conducting that interview prep with them, coaching them through the process, I'm on the phone with the companies, again, advising them on the process and making sure that I'm helping them be successful in hiring those veterans.
Wow. Now, I'd imagine you have some interesting conversations. You ever have some of those veterans kind of bleed their personal challenges and frustrations in the course of that?
I do, but I understand it, right? Like I was that veteran job seeker 2 years ago, and I understand that, and I think that's what it makes our job so important, right? Is you can't just judge someone off their resume. You can't judge a book by its cover, right? You really have to have those conversations with the veterans and understand what they're coming from, what they're looking for, and what their transferable skills are that you can then advocate for them to the companies. And that can't be done by just, looking at a resume. So, yeah, I mean, I've definitely had multiple conversations where I'm commiserating with a veteran about, shared less than ideal experiences in the military or shared struggles in the job search. Like I definitely understand where they're coming from. So those conversations where there might be a little bit of too much honesty, they're good because it helps me understand the veteran and their perspective.
I think it probably helps you stay grounded too, and
Oh yeah,
appreciating that they're not just a voice on the phone. They're someone just like yourself, like myself, and other veterans, and they're at a point in their life when they need the help, and that's got to be satisfying.
exactly.
So now that you've had a little bit of time in the role and you've kind of gained some experience in the field, what skills would you say a successful recruiter has or has to develop?
I think one of the things that is really important coming to the table is the ability to multitask.
Hmm.
I mentioned that I've got 30 different companies that I'm looking for, to place veterans. They're all at different stages of that process that I described before, right? So some of them I might be at day one where I am just receiving the information for the first time, reaching out to the client. And then on other roles. I'm in the screening process. I'm talking to candidates. I'm reviewing their resumes. I'm seeing if they're a good fit. At other points, I might be scheduling interviews, negotiating offers, checking in on candidates who've already been placed, and making sure that their onboarding is going well. So, being able to juggle all of those balls at once is very important. And I think that translates into other types of recruiting as well, right? If you're working for if you're a corporate recruiter, you're working for a company like Amazon, perhaps, you have to juggle all those balls. You've got all those candidates that are in different stages of the process as well, and make sure that you maintain that. I think another big thing for me, and one of the most exciting parts of the job for me, is problem solving.
Hmm.
As a former Army officer, as a military police, MOS, there's a lot of problem solving that happened. A lot of we got to get this done right away because the boss said so, or everything's an emergency, right? And that keeps things exciting and it keeps it from being monotonous. And that's something that I think definitely I see in this role. There's small problems from I've got to convince the hiring manager that this veteran is a fit, right? That I spoke to this veteran and there's more than just meets the eye on the resume. That's a
Hmm.
problem right there that I've got to solve. Maybe the problem is we just can't get these schedules to line up and get that interview scheduled. And maybe it's the candidate isn't upholding their end of the bargain and they're not calling me back, or the company's not calling me back, and I've got to try to figure out how to rewrite the ship, right? So
Right.
there's all of those different types of problems that I solve on a daily basis that keeps this exciting. And kind of going off of that, I think a big quality that helps make people successful in this role is perseverance, right? There's going to be roadblocks, there's going to be speed bumps, but can you work past those? Sometimes it's advising the company, hey, I've seen the hiring process work really well for other companies, and yours just, you've got too many steps, right? Like
Right.
being able to not just cut it off and say like, hey, we can't work with you anymore because your process stinks. It's going and talking to the company and saying, hey, let me help you, let's get past this roadblock. Let's figure it out together. And it's the same thing with candidates, right? Maybe a candidate, their timeline shifted a little bit, but they're a fit and they're going to make a really great employee for this company. So kind of working through that and just being able to persevere and not get down, when there's those speed bumps.
With all this going on, do you ever find that you can make a few moments to help that candidate refine their resume or give them a few pointers on how to have a successful interview?
Oh, absolutely. So the pointers on how to have a successful interview, that's one of the major portions of my role, is doing that that interview prep with candidates. So once an interview is scheduled for a candidate, I also schedule a 15 to 30-minute block, depending on how much they need or how much they want. Block a time that I call the candidate and say, okay, let's review the company, right? Did you do your research? Let's review the job requirements and the basic qualifications. Can you speak to all of those? Do you have specific examples prepared that you're going to talk about in your interview? Let's review your elevator pitch, right? You want to keep that concise. So, I'll give them my example of my elevator pitch and help them refine theirs. And then, just talking through what questions do they have about the position, the company, what questions are they going to ask in the interview, and helping them. Sometimes I've got candidates who say, oh, I did all my research. I got 10 questions. I've got them written down and I'm ready to go. And then I've got other candidates that are like, oh, I didn't really think about that. Like, what do you think I should ask? So I walk them through like, okay, let's talk about asking about what's a typical day look like in this role. What's the company culture like? What does your training consist of? What can I expect? And just, walking them through those best practices. To go back to the beginning of your question, you mentioned, do I see opportunities to help candidates with their resumes? Absolutely. Yes. We have a great group of recruiting managers. So when they bring in those veterans to our database, they are that initial step that's really helping them write their resume. But sometimes, I know the companies and I know what they're looking for and I know what they want to see on the resume. So I can help coach the veterans, the candidates on, hey, here's what you can do to target your resume and really make it pop for that HR rep or that hiring manager who is looking at your interview or at your resume before we move to an initial interview. I did this just yesterday. I had a nuke EM who his resume was just kind of bare bones, right? It was just like job title and unit, and that's it. And I was like, hey, we're going for an electrical shift manager position. They want to see what you've done, right? Like, let's put some really good bullet points. I sent him an example resume and he was able to turn it around, less than 24 hours later with fantastic substantiation on that resume that really highlighted what he had done in each role. So yes, it is definitely something that I get to do on a daily basis.
Awesome. Now, you also mentioned salary negotiation. I've heard somebody say, two different somebodies actually at the senior rank, that veterans underestimate their value. What do you tell these applicants, these candidates, veteran job seekers, when it comes to salary negotiations?
So I have a couple thoughts based on that sentiment. I think sometimes, yes, veterans do underestimate their value. I had an interview prep session last week where the candidate was like, hey, I think I'm going to go in there and just tell them that I'm not qualified for this position. I don't have the specific qualities and experiences that they're looking for. And I was like, no. Please don't tell them that. You absolutely have what they're looking for, right? They are coming to us looking for your transferable skills. They are looking for your ability to troubleshoot, repair, and more often than not, lead, right? Like, even if you are a junior service member, let's say you were never a leader in the military, when you compare yourself to a junior civilian, you are leaps and bounds ahead of them, right? You have that discipline, you have that drive, you have been in elite units. And those are all things that our civilian employers are looking for. So don't sell yourself short when it comes to that. On the flip side, we see a lot of candidates who are, they come out of the service and, they're shooting for the moon when it comes to compensation, right? Like, hey, I've been in the military for 6 years and I will accept nothing less than $150,000 for starting salary.
Good luck with
Okay,
that.
that might be a little unrealistic, right? Like, absolutely, you have great transferable skills. You are a hot commodity, but you also have to understand that, you don't have necessarily the industry experience that would get you up to that high mark, right? Like, let's give it a couple of years. Let's grow into the role. Let's learn about the industry that you're going to move into, and then we can start talking about those high numbers, right?
Right. And I've spoken to some folks about that and told them, look, it's about productivity, it's about profit and loss. And so when a company is investing X number of dollars into you, it's about what you can do. Can you go into a manufacturing environment and increase their productivity by 8 or 10%, generating an additional $500,000 in production at the end of the year? Well, an additional $500,000 worth of production is worth $150,000 salary if you retain that person for 3 years. If you're
Right.
coming into an organization to be the shift leader at a security say a security guard at a museum, there's no profit, there's no P&L here, so have realistic expectations. And if you've
Right.
only been in the military for 6 years and you're expecting 150K out of the gate, hopefully during those 6 years people called you doctor,
Yeah.
because you might want, and again, have those realistic expectations, and I'd imagine you've had those conversations quite a few times.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I saw one of the comments just now is it's not necessarily about what you did, but what you can do and what you can bring to the table, right? So, highlighting those transferable skills. One of the conversations I have very often with candidates is, I understand and the company understands that you may not have worked on their machinery, right? This is a manufacturing business. This is a manufacturing company. We don't have manufacturing in the military, but do you understand motors, drives, gears?
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand AC/DC? Like, can we take that transferable skills from the machinery that you worked on in the military, that baseline level of knowledge, and translate it into their machinery, into their industry? And that's where your value is, and that's what they understand in our candidates, and that's what they're looking for, right? They don't want you to be able to work on bottling manufacturing equipment. They just want your skills that are transferable, and that drive, that motivation, that you bring from your military experience.
I'm hearing from some folks in employment and in recruitment and in HR roles that we are slowly evolving out of the ATS checklist minimum eligibility requirements towards a model of talent management and seeking out trainable talent. And I keep hearing over and over again, hire for talent, train for skill sets. Are you hearing that from some of the employers that you're talking to?
Yes. And that's one of the things that when our sales team brings in the opportunities, that's one of the things that they're pushing first and foremost, right? Again, going back to the specific industry experience, a lot of the industries that we work with don't have transferable, translatable equipment in the military. For instance, I was working with a company a couple of months ago that would take blood from animals. They would basically like dehydrate the blood and then turn
Mm-hmm.
it into protein that could be used as fuel for other animals or plants, right? We don't do that in the military. That is,
No.
it does not translate, right, that industry. However, the types of machines that they have, are very comparable to the types of machines that we would be working on in the military. It's just, you got to train on the new stuff, right, using that baseline level of knowledge. So absolutely, we are seeing the companies that are coming to recruit military, that are seeking veterans to employ them, are looking for those transferable skills. They're looking for the qualities that veterans typically possess, not necessarily the skills that are super refined on their type of equipment. So I think you're spot on with that.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, and one of the things I've heard somebody say as well, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this, is that veterans come to the table with an unusually large amount of management experience and conversely less industry experience. So their level of industry experience, specific skill set, specific equipment like you're talking about, below where your average peer at the age of 25 or 28 or 30 might be. But their leadership experience is just ridiculously far ahead of their peers, such that, and I've heard this number 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, once the veteran has developed 4 or 5 years of industry experience, they will far outpace their peers in terms of comp, responsibility, and career growth. Your thoughts?
So I think yes, it makes sense that candidates have that. Very young candidates coming out of the military are far outpace their peers in the civilian world when it comes to experience, because from a very young age in the military, maybe 20, 21, they're given responsibility, leadership responsibility over others. And it's not just like, hey, supervise this person on their shift. It's like life and death, right? Make sure that this person stays alive in combat. Make sure that this person is doing okay in their home life. Make sure that, they've got everything so that they are combat effective. It's high stakes. So we give veterans that responsibility very early on, and it's a different type of responsibility than their peers would even see in the civilian sector. On the note with they may be a little bit behind when it comes to industry experience, my counter argument to that would be, I think the average veteran who has been in for 5, 6+ years has been put into many different situations and scenarios and positions in their career where they don't know what they're doing on day one, right? There's collateral duties, there's additional duties. There are responsibilities where you're like, I've never done this before, and the veteran figures it out on the fly and excels at it. And I think that's one of the biggest strengths of our veterans moving into the civilian sectors. They've been put in those positions time after time after time again, and they've excelled and they've exceeded expectations because they figure out what it takes to be successful in that position, and they make the mission happen no matter what.
Individual responsibility, self-learner, a default to action, and a high degree of work ethic and integrity. We could go on and on and on about all this. I think you're spot on, and we hear this over and over again, that companies look to the talent and look to the soft skills and look to the transferable leadership qualities that these veterans bring to the table, and then once they gain that industry experience, they're borderline unstoppable. Alexis, if you had one piece of advice, if you were talking to a transitioning service member, and there were a couple of them who've already commented about being interested in going into the recruiting industry, what advice would you give them?
So I would think about the skills that we've talked about today, right? Those transferable skills from your military career that would lead you to being a great recruiter, right? Can you multitask? Can you talk to people about their experiences and pull out those transferable skills? Can you problem solve? Can you advise people on best practices? If you can do those things, everything else will come, and you'll learn the recruiting industry as you're in it. But those skills are what I've seen make a successful recruiter. And then, just researching market trends, hiring trends, right? What's going on in current events that affects the recruiting industry, that affects the job market, right? Right now, inflation is huge. So, how is inflation affecting cost of living in different types of or different locations in the US, and how does that affect the hiring industry? And then, that's very different from 2 years ago when we were on hiring freezes and a lot of people didn't have it in the budget, didn't have it in the plan to bring on more. So just kind of doing your research and understanding what's kind of going on, what are those trends? I think if you can take that knowledge and that research into a potential interview, putting it on a cover letter, depending on what you're interviewing for, just showing that you are interested and willing to do the work, willing to learn about the industry, I think will pay dividends in the hiring process.
Alexis, I think you're hitting a home run ball here. If I were getting ready to start in the recruiting industry, I would be listening to this young lady right here. Alexis, thank you very much for your time today. On behalf of RecruitMilitary and the folks that joined us, thank you very much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Likewise.
And folks out there in LinkedIn and Facebook land, if you haven't already done so, do yourself a solid and use the link that's been scrolling down below, rmvets.com/live. That'll take you to a website where you'll find over 400,000 job opportunities for more than 16,000 employers around the world and around the corner. And folks, just like Alexis, are standing by to help you make the connection with your next career opportunity. You'll also find information about our job fairs and a library of content, all designed to help veterans, transitioning service members, and mil spouses find their next meaningful career. That about wraps it up for us today. Again, Alexis, thank you. Thank you 100 times. Thank you.
Thank you.
Join us next week when we will have a return visit from one of our most popular guests, Mr. Justin Henderson, who's also part of the RecruitMilitary family. He's going to be schooling us up on salary negotiations. Alexis just touched on it during the conversation today. Justin's going to take us headfirst into the topic. And I'll tell you what, if you want to put more money in your pocket, you can't leave it on the table. So don't miss that one. Until then, this has been Lucas Connolly for RecruitMilitary Live. Good luck and Godspeed.